This is Ben Knight from Chef and the Farmer in Kinston, North Carolina, and you're listening to U.S. Modernist Radio.
Mama don't allow no architecture around here. Mama don't allow no architecture around here. Oh, I don't care what Mama don't allow, gonna draw mine modern anyhow. Mama don't allow no architecture around here.
Welcome to U.S. Modernist Radio, where we talk and laugh with people who enjoy, own, create, dream about, preserve, love, and hate modernist architecture, the most exciting and controversial buildings in the world. If you're a fan of this podcast, and we thank all 19 of you from the bottom of our modernist hearts, you've probably also heard about our two wonderful guests today. Architect and podcaster Steve Chung was the host of Cool Spaces on PBS, and architect Donna is co-host of the Architect podcast. And now, although Bjarke Engel still curses in Danish whenever his name comes up, here is your host, Mr. Modernism, George Smart.
Hi, folks. It's a beautiful day here in Raleigh, North Carolina. Also home of the Carolina Hurricanes, who, when we recorded this show, are battling their way towards the legendary Stanley Cup.
Yes.
Let's hope they make it all the way. Fortunately for podcasts, there are no Stanley Cups, but if there were, our two guests today would lead the league in scoring. We've had the pleasure of interviewing fellow podcast hosts from around the country this past year, and I'm particularly excited to get these two on the same show. U.S. Modernist Radio is underwritten by Modernist realtor Angela Roll.
In our continuing world of make-believe, modernist realtor Angela Roll was raised on a secluded modernist island in the Amazon, populated only by immortal warrior women with impeccable tastes. When architect Le Corbusier crashes his plane into this paradise, Princess Diana is too busy teaching a soul cycle class and sends Angela to deal with the French bespectacled architect. Le Corbusier, after ranting in French about how Americans have no style,
Mon Dieu!
He encourages Angela to leave the all-female sanctuary to enter the cynical world of gabled roofs and men for the first time. Ever since, on a mission to defend modernism, Angela deals with unreasonable sellers, unrealistic buyers, incompetent builders, and bureaucratic city councils, while hoping to unlock the potential superpower of modernism the world has yet to fully appreciate.
Zowie!
Modernist realtor Angela, that was close. Modernist realtor Angela Roll is your superheroine. Reach her at angelaroll.com. That's spelled R-O-E-H-L, or call her at 919-995-0550.
And the puck is good. It's a score!
Yay!
Okay, all right. Architect Steve Chung is based in Boston, where the good clam chowder lives. Not that awful Manhattan red stuff. He is focused on residential and hospitality projects. He graduated in architecture from Harvard and interned with Richard Meier in New York, worked for, I'm going to mess this up, Machado Silvetti in Boston, and collaborated with designer Philippe Starck. He taught at Northeastern, Cornell, the Rhode Island School of Design, the University of Texas at Austin, and at Yale. He was the host and creator of the PBS series Cool Spaces, The Best New Architecture, which ran in 2014 to 2015, and is currently co-host with Doug Patt on the Design Your Dream Home podcast. Steve has appeared on HGTV, Travel Channel, Fine Living Network, and Showtime, as well as hosting national AIA videos called Architect Live. Welcome, Steve.
Thanks, George. Thanks for having me.
Architect Donna is the host of the Architect podcast with guests we know and love, such as Sekou Cook and David and Marina from Midnight Charrette, plus our buddy Rusty Long from right here in North Carolina. She's a graduate of the University of Arizona and also Cranbrook, which is like the Jedi Academy for Architecture. Her career began at Atkin Olshan Shade, which you don't want to say too fast, in Philadelphia in historic preservation. In 2005, she moved to Indianapolis to launch a custom residential business as well as teaching architecture at Ball State University, which you may all know is David Letterman's school. He mentions it all the time.
That's right.
She joined Roland Design in 2017 and was also president of the Indianapolis AIA. Is that right?
That's correct, yes.
That's correct. Welcome, Donna.
Thank you for having me. I'm very excited.
So, Donna, before we get started, I just have to ask. I understand that as a child, you designed Barbie a condo. And I have so many questions. Like, was Ken involved?
Oh, yes.
Was this before Architect Barbie was on the market? What was her budget? Tell me about the client.
Long before. But the condo was actually the bookshelf that my parents somehow didn't mind if I completely emptied out every weekend. So I would empty out the entire bookshelf and make a high-rise condo. I always dreamt of an urban Barbie. It had to be the urban, windows flooded with light.
Did you
Barbie.
put it in an elevator?
No, she just flew from floor to floor. And yes, Ken was always involved. But I have to say, I was always really interested in setting up the condo. And then once it was all set up and I knew where she kept her clothes and where the kitchen was and where the bedroom was and where she entertained, I wasn't that interested in doing those things. I just wanted to set those things up. So once they were set up, my design work was done. Barbie was free to live her life.
Has Barbie given you any good referrals?
She has not, but I still love designing for ladies, I have to say.
Now, where was this? Where did you grow up?
I grew up in Arizona, about 5 miles away from Taliesin West. So you could say that I've had a lot of architecture in my life.
Did you have it in your family, or did you just discover it more on your own?
I discovered it more on my own. My father is a metallurgical engineer, so I had a lot of engineering nerdiness in my background, but my mother in the 70s did a lot of 70s crafts like macrame, so I think the art side came from there. Yeah, I got the engineering and art background mix, plus then Taliesin. And also, I don't want to make this all about me, but growing up in Scottsdale in the 80s, it was the epitome of the sprawling suburb. The way that we think about sprawling suburbs, that's exactly what was happening then. And so seeing how the desert that I played in as a child got taken over by these red roof tile waves of housing, it was pretty impactful to me.
Well, it's still sprawling, right? It's only gotten worse.
Yes, absolutely. But I think we're at least starting to come aware of the fact that maybe we shouldn't sprawl. So that's a lesson for 30 years on.
Stephen, I assume you did not have Barbie as a client, but did you have some early experiences that pointed you towards design?
That's a good question. I grew up in upstate New York, near Albany, in a place that was not a very interesting suburb. Would always look forward to Sunday New York Times Magazine, where I would see these kind of New York 5 style houses in the back in the real estate section.
Charles Grothmy and Richard Meier and that gang?
Yeah, exactly right. So that got me sort of excited that there was probably another world out there. And yeah, then I did do some summer programs when I was in high school. I discovered Richard Meier when I was 16, and I bought that first white book and carried it around when I was a 16-year-old junior in high school or sophomore, I guess. I don't know. That was something very different than the place that I grew up in. I just thought I never really saw architecture or buildings that could look like that. And I guess that's what sort of set me on my path.
What were the buildings like where you grew up?
Well, it's the capital of New York. And so you have all these state workers and a lot of houses that sort of look like a state worker would look in it. They're very repetitive and of a certain watered-down colonial style that then would be repeated in endless cul-de-sacs and suburbs. So it was pretty monotonous, I would say.
You did have that great government complex downtown, right?
Yeah, well, that's extraordinary, and only in the sense that it's the biggest, sort of emptiest place that just these kind of monumental design in this otherwise very small scale place. It's strange that it did not really leave that strong an impression on me. It was less that than just wanting to move or go someplace else.
I was going to ask about the government complex in Albany because it's kind of a mini Brasilia, isn't it?
That's right. That's right.
Yeah. And one of my very early growing up memories in Scottsdale, Arizona, where I grew up, was the Scottsdale government complex, which has since been destroyed, but it was a wonderful, very early example by Benny Gonzalez of vernacular modernism. So it was a library and city hall and government complex and big plaza that was all modernist Pueblo kind of. And very, very, very impactful on me. I wanted to spend every moment of my day down there that I could. And it was the big open plazas and big white spaces, but also very much suited to the desert environment. Lots of deep overhangs and deep shadows. So I think that in my case, the government complex actually did have a pretty enormous impact on me. I'm not as familiar with Albany, though, but I do think of it as being sort of space age modernism, isn't it?
It is, and it's an overwhelming scale. This is Nelson Rockefeller with his architect handpicked Wallace Harrison deciding to raise, I think, 8 city blocks of nice, fine scale, kind of older townhouses, row houses, that sort of fabric to kind of raise that, make a big podium, and then plop onto it a Brasilia-style series of modernist towers. We would go there as school kids on field trips and just sort of walk around this empty plaza and with the pretty amazing artwork of Stellas and abstract artists, and everything was sort of the best, but at the same time, it was not a place. I mean, it was a place to go to be alone. It was a kind of a weird place for sure.
What year was this, approximately?
This is 70s?
70s. Because it was built, I believe, in the late 50s.
No, not the Empire State Complex.
Okay, was that later?
Yeah, it's a little later.
Because here in North Carolina, we took that complex as a template to design our own government complex.
That's right.
That did not work out so well either. Mostly because I think the same thing happened in both states. The original plan was wonderful, but then it got value engineered by the legislatures.
I see. Yeah, I don't think it was a budgetary thing. I think it was more just really of a demonstration of power, of government authority. And I don't know where they were looking, but looking at models that were ill-suited for this place at the scale of this city. I mean, yes, it's the capital of New York, but it's not New York City. I mean, it's a small city of a kind of a smaller grain fabric that then, this was sort of foisted upon it and was really kind of a demonstration of power.
I guess by that time, New York was raising in prominence on a lot of levels and wanted to make statements in some of their key cities.
Yeah.
Donna, let's talk about you. How did you first get into podcasting on the supply side and not just as a listener?
I have been involved with the website Archinect virtually since it began. Just as a commenter, the Archinect forums were really the very first social media of almost any type, let alone of architecture. The forums back in, this is now almost 20 years ago, were really the place online that architects could come together and talk shop. And they were pretty legendary back in the day for some regulars and some funny posts and kind of like a pre-Reddit. But
was this before we had trolls?
The most common insult at the time was "you pee like a girl." that was considered the ultimate insult. Which, of course, these days you would never use that as an insult. But
right.
But that was kind of what it was like. It was sort of college. It was like an extension of the studio hours late at night when you're all getting giddy and the project is due the next day.
And you don't think anybody else is reading it except you guys.
Except us guys. It feels very much like the dive bar that we all hang out at. Yeah, that nobody else is hanging out at. And just by commenting a lot there, being involved, writing some articles, I became a guest editor. I submitted a few articles. And then when Paul Petunia, the founder of Archinect, who has an architecture degree but never became an architect, he's just been running Archinect for the last 25 years. When he decided to do a podcast, my co-host Ken Kunze and I had both talked about, wouldn't it be fun to do a podcast? And Ken sort of mentioned it to him. And Paul very generously asked us to be his co-hosts. And so the three of us, formerly we had another co-host, Amelia. We have just sort of formed it as we went along. And again, I feel like we were one of the very early architecture podcasts. And it's changed a bit over the years. It became less frequent for one because, as you all know, doing a podcast is a lot of So we've become more.
Do we know that, Tom? I don't know if we know that or not.
Piece of cake.
Yeah.
Piece of cake.
I think it really
the
depends
hours.
on how much.
Yeah.
It really depends on your support staff. If you got the support people who can deal with it all, the actual recording is fun. And so Paul asked me to join, and we've been doing that. And we've interviewed a lot of, very famous people. Patrick Schumacher twice, although I frankly don't feel like he needs any more space to put his opinion out into the world than he already has. So he won't be a guest anymore.
Has he been banned? Have you banned him?
We haven't banned him, but, he's got to do something more interesting than his just regular shtick that he just does over and over again.
Okay.
We had Stephen Hall on. We had Todd Williams, Billy Chen. That was probably one of my favorite episodes ever. They're just amazing when you get the two of them speaking together. Phil Freelon was one of the best episodes we've ever done.
Right here in North Carolina? Yep.
Yes, exactly. That was a couple years ago. It's just been amazing to meet people over the podcast waves, but then also we do news roundups sometimes, so to be able to talk about news or to have a news item come up that then we can bring someone on as a guest who's linked to that news item in some way. It's really been fun just spreading the word and, getting people talking about architecture. I've loved doing it. We have actually a big guest this week that I'm not allowed to talk about, but we're interviewing tomorrow.
Okay.
So you'll see that in another week or so. But
we'll keep that double secret.
I'm not allowed to say, but you might think of a famous name for a dog that comes to mind.
Lassie?
Yes, Lassie. Lassie's going to bark
on
into the microphone.
Okay.
No, I can say no more.
Say no more. Say no more. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge.
Exactly.
You came to podcasting sort of after some other experiences. You had the Cool Spaces show, which we'll talk about. But I understand originally you were doing video for the AIA. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, we have to go back further in time. From the recession, 2007, 2008, I got wiped out. And, I don't know why I simplified it like this, but I really, at that time, I felt like architects were not connecting with the general public effectively. And I was teaching or practicing and talking to my friends and their architects, and we're, I think, just really far removed from what everyday people were thinking and perceiving what architects do and what kind of value it can bring. And so I started thinking about different ways to connect, and I did not want to write papers that I can't write. I started thinking about maybe television as an option. So an idea was hatched, but it took a long time to get people behind it. The AIA was somebody that I approached 3 times. The third time they said, well, why don't we maybe do a video or something? It took a while, and it was an experiment because they were not at that time used to trying to interact with the general public. It was more architects to architects, maybe. And so I was trying to do something a little bit different. I was also parallel track talking to HGTV and Travel Channel and other places trying to figure out how to pitch the right idea, which I was always not right. It was not working, but I was getting closer each time, trying to figure out what that formula might be. It's a process. So it was a very long process. And, finally, with AIA, they started talking to me about radio. And I said, you know what, I don't want to put down podcasting, but I said, we're architects. This is a visual medium. We should be on TV. We should have video. And they said, yeah, you're right. And so they began to help me a little bit on the TV end of it. And so it's funny, Donna, you mentioned those names, Stephen Hall, Phil Freelon. Who was the third person you mentioned? But I mean, these people are all on the
Lassie. I think she mentioned Lassie.
Todd Williams. Yeah, and Lassie. These are guests. Yeah. These are all guests on the show. We focus on their buildings. Phil Freelon was amazing. I mean, it was fantastic to be able to meet and interact with these people, for them to be able to show their work. We also had the client interaction, but basically through the visual medium. I mean, to be able to use video or television, basically, to show their work, to illustrate, to highlight what it is that they do. And the focus was not on architects, but it was on the general public. That was an amazing experience. I feel terrible now because we're not doing it anymore. I think it was less us. It's more about public television and the nature of the way people consume media. And that whole model is having hard times. I don't think it's us. But when we were done, I said, now I'm back to where I started. But I said, you know what? Podcasting seems like a place where I don't need to go through a gatekeeper. I don't really need to ask permission. I can design something or create something, and maybe I can just sort of, make a go of it. Again, focused on, in this case, homeowners, less, again, design professionals, although they listen, but really more focused on homeowners, creating a resource for them. I find it really interesting, really enjoyable. I mean, again, it's a little different than what I had originally set out to do, but I like doing it. I like interacting with other designers, architects, other design professionals, but working together to try to create value, resources for homeowners. It's been enjoyable, and I've met a lot of interesting people. Again, it's different than television, but I want to do something that's useful. So far, so good.
Yeah. Well, okay. You don't have to get dressed up for a podcast or put on makeup.
Or we're close.
I'm in pajamas.
Right. You can just sip your bourbon right there.
Sip your bourbon in your pajamas.
And they don't make you work the telethons.
But, Stephen, it's funny, the whole video aspect, because you're right. Architects, we are so visual. And I always want to see things when they're being talked about. But one of the ways we thought about the Architect podcast was especially like students in studio working, or people doing CAD or Revit, like sitting at their desk and they need to focus, and so they put on their headphones and they can just listen to something. And I love that aspect of it too, but I frequently will then go and look up the building. I want to go see what they're talking about. But there was one, I think, very short-lived video podcast that came out of LA for a while. And it was something like can we swear on this podcast?
Sure.
Okay, so it was a kind of a video architecture version of Marry, Fuck, Kill, where they put up a picture of a building, and then the 3 panelists would talk about, would you marry this or fuck it or kill it? And they talked about it as architecture. So it was kind of just buildings around LA that they all knew and loved or hated. And I loved it. It was an amazing format, very, very low tech. And just like, here's an image of this building on La Cienega that I drive by every day and I don't know anything about it. And then they would just either tear it to shreds or talk about how much they loved it. And I actually think that is really great. I mean, it's almost like the TV shows like The Mystery Singer or Who's Got Talent or whatever. It's almost like that. Like you put something up and people just critique it. There's a really fun aspect to that as well. Although you're absolutely right, Stephen, that we need to be trying as a profession to reach out to other people, not just talk amongst ourselves, because we do tend to get really insular and bogged down in the in-jokes about, well, that's not a very Corbusian corner or whatever. And yeah, it's not very helpful to most people.
And by the way, it's not that I mind those things. There are podcasts that are more focused on more serious design enthusiasts, and that's fine. I just think that there's less on the consumer side. And, for example, I used to joke about the AI convention. There's a convention called Real Screen. It's for TV professionals. And the amazing thing about that place is that it's a marketplace. That's where networks want content. They want filmmakers, producers, they want to see content. They want to see ideas. They want to be pitched. I go to the AI convention and I basically meet my alumni and I see products, but there's no clients. It's not like a place where I can get something or we're connecting outside the industry. And I always thought, gosh, would I sign up for a conference where people that wanted cool houses to be designed would show up, people that wanted libraries and schools designed, and basically every lobby was a meeting hall for people really trying to do deals and get jobs. I'd be like, I'd be all over that. I would love that. And that's what that TV conference was. And I used to go there. I'd be like, oh, you're from Travel Channel? I've got an idea. And they would be like, oh, what is it? We want to hear it. I really thought that was really cool. And I just felt like, geez, I wish we had something more like that. I don't know. I've told the AA this and they don't, Nice. That sounds great, Stephen. So I come at it from a different angle and just try to figure out how we can make more of a difference.
We've had on the show other people who've had PBS series. Ben and Vivian, who do Chef and the Farmer, which you've seen on PBS for years, were telling us about their experience. And people come up to them all the time and congratulate them on their series and how well they're doing, and just assume they're making a huge pile of money off of this. But the truth was they had to raise the money for PBS. It wasn't like PBS came along and said, here's $4 million to shoot your series. I assume that was your experience as well. You had to really hoof it a little bit out there.
Yeah, I'll just tell really quickly. This took me, I think, 6 years. And I approached over, I think it was 90-something companies and organizations to try to raise money. It took me that long just to raise the money because PBS doesn't help. They give you a letter and they say, hey, if he has the money, we'll love to air this. And I say, gee, thanks. We're not Curious George where they're willing to kind of, get in on it. So it took a long time. And the reason I think I got really excited in the beginning is because one of my first calls was to Mercedes-Benz. And I basically wrote the CMO and told them how I loved architecture and how important architecture was. And I know they had built a museum in Stuttgart, and will they support me? And they said, yeah, we will. And they said, we'll give you this. And I said, oh, that was easy. And then 3 years later, and 0 for 85 or whatever, I said, I guess that was beginner's luck. Yeah. And it was beginner's luck because apparently that's not how you're supposed to do things. That was like completely incorrect and not the right way, but I had reached directly out to the right person and he said, that sounds cool. I like that. But otherwise, you're supposed to go from agency to their agency to, all these different people and in between. And I just kind of didn't do that because I did everything wrong. And in the beginning, it was beginner's luck. After that, I went through the proper channels and I failed, constantly failed because I had no metrics, no proof of concept, nothing. It was a battle. It was a very long, windy road. And I think it's much harder now because people don't want to have a constrained message on PBS. They just don't consume media like that. Why do I need to wait till 8 o'clock on Monday to watch this program and then have to listen to these messages? And then not only that, the messages are constrained. PBS is very stringent and careful about the kind of messaging they allow. And companies are like, why do I need to shape my message to fit your model? I don't need to do it. And so I think they're going to have a very hard time going forward.
Are you talking about those underwriting guidelines where they tell you how you can say mobile oil or whatever when you introduce the underwriters?
You can't see a face. You can have a silhouette. They wanted to talk about the Mercedes S-Class. They said, oh, that sounds too salesman-like. Can you change it? I said, we're not going to change our creatives just because you want us to. Take it or leave it. You know what? They actually ended up leaving it. PBS says, we want to see another option. And they said, we're not going to change anymore. Take it or leave it.
Wow.
And they pulled funding from me and from a music show and something else. So it was really pretty sore about that whole experience. I raised more money elsewhere, but it would have been another 4 episodes if I could have finished full season. So it's a very hard thing. People don't realize that for most independent filmmakers, you have to raise the money and then you have to go through very strict PBS guidelines. And then also they're there to review your content and offer advice. I know that we're supposed to be independent, but they have their opinion. So
they do.
Yeah, it's a process.
What was your favorite guest to talk to? What was most fascinating for you? I know you talk with some really celebrated people.
Yeah, it's funny because you'd say, oh, we talked to Frank Gehry or Stephen Hall and people like that. But Donna, you would appreciate this. It was Phil Freelon, the architect from where you guys are, North Carolina, right?
Right.
He's such a generous thoughtful person. I didn't really know him before, and I just really appreciated his point of view and what he tries to do in architecture. I mean, he's a very well-regarded guy, but he's not didn't have the kind of ego that most of the others had, and that's bad, but he just was talking about the project he was working for. It was a kind of a cultural center in part of town that I think it was a African-American cultural arts center, and it was a project that he really wanted to do and had a lot of meaning for him. And I just appreciated his point of view and thinking that architecture, you can do something very meaningful, not just because it's going to be on a magazine or because it pays you well or something. I don't know. I just felt a very different sense of purpose with him. Just kind of re-inspired me in a way, just to meet the guy and interact with him. And, these shows, you spend a couple of days with most of these architects, and there's lots of time you're not on camera and we're just talking, and people speak pretty freely and comfortably, and also they're nice to you because you're a host. It was good. It was a good experience. I really admire him and always will promote him wherever I go. Just say, hey, check out that guy. He's a great guy. He's a very good designer, but he's a really great person.
Yeah, he's just wonderful. I can't speak highly enough of him. He's so generous. And he really spoke about how he started his firm and the things that were hard starting up and making decisions about who he did and did not want to design for in terms of what was community good and not. I mean, he's just an amazing, generous spirit. Like you, I was so inspired after we spoke with him for an hour. He's just an incredible person.
Mm-hmm.
Donna, you're involved with a great group called People for Urban Progress. What is that about?
People for Urban Progress is a nonprofit here in Indianapolis, and it started up 10 years ago when the city of Indianapolis knocked down the 1970s structure that was a brutalist football stadium downtown that was known as the Hoosier Dome. And the Hoosier Dome had an air-supported Teflon vinyl roof. And when it was being demolished, our founder, Michael Bricker, who grew up here, asked the city and asked the general contractor what's happening to all that fabric from the roof. And they said it's going to a landfill. So he's somehow, this 22-year-old graduate of the University of Texas, Austin, who had come back to his hometown of Indianapolis, he somehow scrambled together the ability to save 13 acres of this Teflon-coated roof and got it into temporary storage. And then he and his sister, who is an interior designer, she got an interior design degree, set about making some bags and wallets and sketchbooks and sort of little handmade goods out of it. And then they sold those goods, and then the nonprofit was formed, and we used the profits from the goods to do things like build shade structures in city parks. We're currently hosting a speakers series. It's 4 episodes on inclusivity and design. And the next one, we bring in a sort of an urban design and inclusivity expert from outside the city and pair them with someone who's local to talk about the issues facing cities, frankly, in terms of equity and racial justice and social equity. And we're a design-based nonprofit in Indianapolis, but we started with this little funny reuse story that came down to
Teflon wallets.
Yeah. And so then when the Super Bowl came to town in 2012, I think it was, we were able to salvage 5 miles worth of Super Bowl banners, and we used the Super Bowl banners also in the wallets and the purses and the bags. And right now what we're doing is we have a line of traveler bags that are made from the first-class leather seat covers from the Acela trains. So the Acela East Coast trains,
sure.
Their first-class train compartments are all being redone. So we have something like 6 pallets of leather seat covers being delivered to the studio every 3 weeks, and we're making those into travel bags. And what's amazing to me about it is to think in these terms of, on a stadium roof, there's 13 acres of vinyl. Like, that's a lot. Every Super Bowl that happens, there's 5 miles worth of banners. And there's a Super Bowl every year, but we're in Indianapolis this month. It's the month of the Indianapolis 500. The banners that come from each event, think about how much vinyl or plastic that is that can potentially go into a landfill. And we are trying to divert at least some of it. We're also trying to affect the production stream by getting in with the vendors like the Speedway beforehand and saying, if you use this kind of vinyl banner, we can reuse it. But if you use this kind, we can't. So we're trying to reduce the amount of overall waste. But when you think of those kinds of numbers, 13 acres of fabric, that's a lot.
Yeah. That's a big parachute right there.
Yes, exactly. And I'm the chair of the board. We are celebrating 10 years this year, so it's a nonprofit that I'm just incredibly proud of being involved with, and it's all been on a pro bono basis. I don't get paid for any of the work I do for it, but it's my favorite thing to do in the city. I'm just so proud of it.
I understand that it's mostly general public. It's not just architects.
Yeah, the board is made up of various people, and there's 2 architects on the board, and that's it. And the appeal of the bag is, of course, across all people. You see the pup bags everywhere, and especially the Acela train bags. People are loving the Amtrak bags. They've sold out every batch so far.
Has Joe Biden bought some? He's a big Amtrak guy.
Right.
He is, isn't he? Well, I'm not happy that he's running for president, but maybe I should reach out to him and see if I could get him to carry an ambulance.
Yeah, buy a few Acela bags. I mean, he's a natural for that.
He is, I guess. Yeah, I have to think about brand management, though.
Now, Steve, post Cool Spaces, I know you've designed at least one building that I've seen, which is fabulous, and that's the new Sarasota Modern in Sarasota. Tell us about that project, because it's fabulous.
Yeah, that's interesting, isn't it? Because when I finished television, I kind of tried to reconsider how to do things, and one of them had to do with going to a place or being in a place where people appreciate the kind of work that I like to do. So let's say that I like to do Richard Meier looking stuff, whatever that means, and it's not here in Boston where I am. One of the other ideas was to embrace technology in all of its forms. And for me, that meant being able to work in different places and using platforms like House. I began to promote myself as an architect in Sarasota, architect in Boston that could do this kind of work. And there, people like the kind of work that I do. And someone basically said, hey, we really like your design. We'll work on this project. Was this something that you'd like to pursue? It became a really great experience. I mean, it was a bit of a challenge because, of course, everything gets cut away and all of that. But overall, having an opportunity to kind of explore Sarasota School of Architecture, Paul Rudolph as a kind of spiritual leader, and all these wonderful Sarasota architects from the 40s, 50s, center of intersecting with mid-century modern, that sort of look, but set in Southwest Florida, was an amazing kind of experience to explore a region and architects that I didn't know so much about, and then to have a chance to sort of work in a setting where people do appreciate, white plaster and more minimalist, let's say, architectural expression. So it's great. It was a great experience, and it was a great, I think, exercise and experiment, which I am continuing. So I live in Boston because I have some roots here. Frankly, my wife, who is tenured at MIT, and I cannot leave. But I spend time there as well, and I just have much more opportunity there for, again, the kind of work that I like and can do than I do in Boston. I've been here for a long time, and people don't ask for the kind of work that I'd like to do, whereas there, I was there for a couple of months, and someone said, hey, we like that. Can you do that here?
What's the progress of Sarasota Modern? Can people book it yet?
Completed. Oh, so sorry. I didn't really tell you anything about the project itself.
Yeah.
It's a hotel. It's a celebration of that era, Sarasota School of Architecture, but it's set in today. So it's not a reproduction of that, but it's really kind of an interpretation of that style. 89 rooms, boutique style kind of place. It feels like you're in Sarasota. I mean, it feels very fresh, I think. It's a boutique style hotel. It's a Marriott soft brand, which means that it can be what we want it to be. It's independent. And we really had the opportunity to kind of design every single aspect of it, from exterior, interior, really a chance to kind of blur the line between inside, outside, and interior design and architecture. So I sort of led all of it, which isn't always the case, I found. That was a great opportunity. And again, inspired by people like Paul Rudolph that said, hey, I'm going to do it all. And the developer was good with that. I highly recommend that one visit if they are in that part of town. And by the way, Sarasota, they love to call themselves the cultural capital of Florida. They take issue with Miami, and they say, if you really want to see real arts and culture and music and film festivals and all of that, you should come to Sarasota. So it's a really underrated city, and the architecture there is unbelievable. I mean, historically. And then so many younger architects, and they're not young now, but those guys that worked in those offices, there is a steady stream of beautiful, let's say, minimalist architecture or contemporary architecture that's there. It's an unbelievable. I mean, there's so many amazing architects and projects that are constantly being built. Of course, you have the wonderful setting, the climate, which allows for kind of inside, outside, flat roof, lots of glass. And you have tremendous foliage and plantings and all of those kinds of things, which makes for a great beginning point for contemporary architecture. It's a great place. I've been excited to work there, and I look forward to doing more work there.
Donna, I have a question for you. Are there any guests that you're really itching to get on your show? I know that we have tried a couple times to get Peter Zumthor to come on and talk about the spa at Val's, which is somewhat endangered by the prospect of a 50-story tower being built right adjacent to it by Tom Main of Morphosis.
By Tom Main.
Yeah. But that's just...
Yeah, no, I think Peter's probably too cranky to come on a podcast, I think. I really actually am enjoying more and more, I have to admit, reaching out to the people that are doing sort of social activism or equity in the city work. I mean, we had Alex Baca on from Washington, D.C. She's in transit planning there, and talking to her was amazing. We had Kate Wagner from McMansion Hell.
Oh, yeah.
She was amazing.
Our good friend, yes. Yep.
You know, these sort of quirky, unknown people locally, they're doing quirky things within the realm of architecture. That's more where my interest is lately. I'm kind of done with Starkitects, I think. For one thing, now I want to have Stephen on to talk about this Sarasota house,
there
strategy.
You go. You got
I'm
a booking,
fascinated
Steve.
by this. Stephen,
I don't want to give away all the
this,
secrets. I've just started to figure it out.
Exactly. That's the thing. And that's part of what we love on the Architect Sessions podcast is to have people come on and talk about how they came up with their ideas to do things, what's the germ of the idea was, because I feel like there's just so many ways you can go in architecture. You can be in architecture school and think to yourself, I'm never going to be as good as Peter Zumthor. And frankly, most of us are not. But you can also do so many other interesting avenues of work that are personally fulfilling and societally fulfilling and make an impact on different audiences. I've done custom residential work for people, and having someone say to me that they love making coffee in their kitchen in the morning, that's like the highest praise I can imagine. But on the other hand, if I could be Thomas Heatherwick and everyone loves the vessel, not that everyone does, but doing something as high profile as that would be amazing too. And like I think everything that stands in between those two edges is what architecture can encompass. So I'm really interested in the people that are doing the paths that you wouldn't really think of right off as going to Harvard and then going to become the next great architect. I'm really interested in the people that are doing the quirky things. So, Stephen, I want to hear about your Sarasota path here, but if you're not ready to share yet.
The people that went to Harvard and then went on a quirky path and didn't become a star architect or super successful, that would be me. That would be me.
That would be you. Exactly. That would be you. And I guess I constantly think about the students that feel pressure because they're not doing what everyone else is doing. And I want them to find that there is value in what they are doing in the world of architecture. A student asked me once, what project am I most proud of? And there's a little stretch of sidewalk that I insisted get built, 30 feet of sidewalk from a bus stop to an entry gate. And I insisted that it get built when a street was being redone. And I'm more proud of that than just about anything because it's accessibility. You know, it's people taking the bus and getting onto a sidewalk and not having to walk in the mud. So to me, that's a huge significance. So yeah, I like the sort of, the quirky, including you, Stephen.
Donna, you want to hear something quirky? This is something that recent. Okay, there's a show on HGTV called Extreme Makeover, something like that. And it's a kind of a big ABC HGTV collaboration. I never watched it, by the way, but it was very popular apparently. And they basically pick a deserving family and they build them a house or they renovate their house and the whole town comes together.
I have heard of it.
Okay.
I've seen it. I've watched TV.
Okay.
I'll admit it.
Okay, so I just haven't seen it. So they said, hey, we want an architect. What do you think? And I said, I don't know. Because I always think it has to be something meaningful, like you're doing something good. And then like, but this is a good thing. You're doing something good. I'm like, I guess that's true. You would be part of something where you're helping someone. I said, okay, I could think about that. That sounds good. And then they said, this is the plan. For the next 3 months, you'd be on a bus traveling the country and you have to do 10 houses. You'd have to design them. It wouldn't be just me, but I'd be like architect. We'd then build this thing and then go to the next place. I said, that sounds horrible. And they said, you really can't be in contact with your family and your office. I said, so what kind of decent architect can shut down for 3 months and not talk to anybody?
And become an itinerant.
I said, that's why most of the people are artists. I mean, they're actors or models, right? Because they're out of work actors, models. And so that, and I said, this is again, what's going on. So the reality is that they want like in a week or 2 weeks for us to design and then make this amazing thing that gets built in a day. And this is not actually what I want to be part of. That it's so fast and so easy.
Not at all.
And I always thought that somehow you could go into a situation and maybe you could kind of insinuate yourself in and be like the spy. And then you could, from the inside, break it open and do something. But that's so stupid. I would have no chance. I would just be sort of helping to perpetuate this silliness. And so, no, I can't be part of that. And it just frustrates me because I just don't like the way that they make it seem so simple. That we have a problem. What can we do? We only have a day. We have 24 hours. And in fact, they don't have 24 hours. They have 24 days or whatever. And they have a huge team and everything. But they make it seem like this one guy can come with a sledgehammer and then we have 4 more hours. What can we do? And then they finish it and it's done. And we did it for like $100. I was like, this is diminishing what we do, diminishing the value. And I just can't be part of that. I just can't help that. I just want to rail against it. And just,
Well, you know who will make a great host for that show?
Who's that?
Art Vandelay. Remember Art Vandelay from Seinfeld?
Yep, of course.
Oh, yeah.
Actually, I realize, though, that if I can have a dream guest, of course it's going to be Brad Pitt, because we know that Brad loves architecture. So I go back to my earlier statement and say, forget the quirky little fun. I want Brad Pitt to come on the Architect Session. So
well, he's being sued right now, so he could talk about that.
Over the Make It Right houses.
Yes, over the houses in Louisiana post-hurricane.
Yep. That's because he brought in architects who were not regionalists. They didn't know how to build in that region for that climate, and that's just a mistake. Like, I think, Stephen, with you, this idea of going to Sarasota but working from Boston, you're someone who's looking at how they build there, how things are built there. You're looking at a vernacular and saying, why is it that way, and what is it that I love about that? And then doing it in a smart way, where with the Make It Right houses, Brad just brought in these people that had no idea how important it is to have shade or porch or not have a flat roof. And so, of course, the houses are falling apart. It's really unfortunate because it was a great initiative. It's a great idea, but it didn't come through well.
Well, Steve, Donna, thank you so much for joining today. It's really a pleasure to talk with other people who are doing what we're doing, and you guys are doing really great.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thanks, George. Thank you. Thank you, Donna.
Thanks for listening. U.S. Modernist Radio is underwritten by Angela Roll, your special real estate agent for Modernist houses. 919-995-0550. Okay, Mr. Gild.
Visit usmodernist.org's massive archives to hear past shows, discover 7,000 mid-century modernist houses, and access 2.6 million pages of classic 20th century architecture magazines. U.S. Modernist Radio is produced by Soundtracks Recording Studios in Raleigh, North Carolina. Our theme song was performed by George Smart and Robinson Earl. Guest research led by Cindy Stratton, not a real name. An enigma to some, feared by others. U.S. Modernist Radio is a production of Modernist Archive, a nonprofit educational archive for the documentation, preservation, and promotion of modernist residential design. I'm Tom Gild. George and I'll be back soon with more quirky guests and another edition of U.S. Modernist Radio.